Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Radio Europa. This is your host William tonight with Darth from Scotland. We're going to talk a little. Hi there. We're going to talk a little bit about Marine Le Pen this week, but before we do, I just want to say if you check the links below, you can find episode 14 and a link to our donations if you fancy helping us out, because we're volunteers and we're totally dependent on our brilliant followers helping us out. So if you'd like to donate something, then the link's in the description below. So Darth, Marine Le Pen, this is an interesting one. Do you want to give the listeners a bit of a background as to what's actually going on here?
Hi William, hi. So this has been a very interesting development. So Marine Le Pen obviously was the one of the presidential candidates for the last election. Obviously she was beat by Emmanuel Macron. She had tweeted 3 images of showing ISIS executions, and including an American journalist, James Foley. In November 2015, she was charged for posting these pictures online due to, I think it was the reason for it was that the posting of the images considered to incite terrorism or pornography or seriously harm human dignity. So I'm guessing it would fall under the third of those summaries. So she has, if she was convicted, she could face up to 3 years in prison or a €75,000 fine. But much more worryingly, she has been ordered by a court to submit to a psychiatric test for posting these social media pictures of the Islamic State atrocities. So not only can she now be charged with posting pictures which are of an extremely graphic nature, she is being forced to submit because they believe that she is insane.
It's almost funny actually when you put it like that, how quite ridiculous this is. So essentially the French judicial system is setting a strange precedent there, because does that apply to news outlets? Are they not allowed to post these pictures?
This is what I was wondering just before we came on air, is that there are times where the news, various news corporations have shown videos of executions. Now normally they don't show the actual physical execution taking place, but it's the run up. You've got all the guys in the orange jumpsuits kneeling in the desert, and you've got, the guys in all black and balaclavas behind them with the knives and the machine guns, making their proclamations and demands. So they're showing that, and all they haven't shown is somebody being killed. They're showing everything but that. So I'm not entirely sure why she has been singled out for these kind of things. And I certainly have come across various executions and brutal, violent issues on Twitter and on Facebook. So I don't see why she all of a sudden is the one that has to submit to psychiatric evaluation. I mean, it's almost something out of like 1984, or something that you would have heard during the Cold War with the Soviet Union.
Yeah, well, I guess because obviously these laws don't always apply to the media, I think we can safely say that it's a very politically motivated trial. But it is interesting. I saw some people spread some things on Twitter showing a link to a Wikipedia page which discussed Soviet abuse of psychoanalysis to persecute people that were considered enemies of the state. And this is, I think we're getting into that territory here, because I suppose what they're doing is they're going to try and abuse the psychiatric psychiatric science, basically, to try and say that Marine Le Pen is unstable. I'm not sure how much background you've got on the case, but because I saw that she mentioned that she wasn't going to submit to the evaluation. What's it looking like in terms of a sentence here? Do you reckon she'll go to prison or get a big fine or what?
If I'm following what I was kind of looking up in various articles, I think if convicted, let's see, her immunity was lifted in order for her to face prosecution in France for posting images considered to incite terrorism or pornography or seriously harm human dignity. If convicted, she could face up to 3 years in prison or a €75,000 fine. Now, I think, this article, it's from The Guardian from the 20th of September. So if I'm reading that correctly, what they're basically saying is if she is convicted for refusing to submit to the psychiatric test, she could face up to 3 years in prison or a €75,000 fine. Both are, quite substantial when you compare it to what's been going on in Sweden with various sexual assaults, violent acts, rapes on, people, both men and women, and you're having, especially migrants are receiving sometimes no prison time at all, no fines, sometimes they're just receiving a warning or community sentence for a seriously violent and sexual assault. And she potentially is getting 3 years or €75,000 fine for effectively saying, no, I'm refusing to, for you to decide whether I'm insane or not, for posting effectively, pictures which are highlighting how terrible and how monstrous the group ISIS are. If anything, she's drawing light to how terrible they are as a group, instead of them trying to say she's a horrible human being for posting these things on social media.
Yeah, that's another disturbing precedent, because you can just imagine the scenario in a year's time when they extend the incitement laws perhaps to cover, for instance, reporting of migrant rapes. They might say that's likely to incite hatred or something like that. And you could find a situation where there's a total media blackout on any criminal act committed by somebody with a darker skin tone, because, ostensibly it would be to prevent hatred, but really what we're looking at is preventing the European public from realizing what their governments are bringing into their societies. So really, Marine Le Pen is a victim of political persecution, because she was simply trying to highlight the barbarity, as you said, of ISIS. But I suppose by extension that implicates the migrant invasion, because it's already been proven that a lot of them have dubious backgrounds, some a minority with links to terrorism. We could be looking at a situation in a few years' time with a total media blackout on this. But thinking directly of French domestic politics in all of this, I'm not sure what the precedent is for this, but as far as I know, Marine Le Pen is one of the only politicians who's ever had her immunity lifted just so she can face trial. Do you know much about that procedure?
No, I know obviously in the UK, the politicians are immune from hate speech convictions when speaking in the Houses of Parliament. I'm pretty sure I think it's Lord Pearson, the guy who's kind of spoke out in favour of Tommy Robinson. He has stated in one of his speeches, that they enjoy the immunity of immunity from hate speech laws when they're speaking in Parliament. So I'm guessing it's something similar in the French parliaments. But no, I've never heard of anybody in any kind of Parliament having their immunity lifted so she can be charged or forced to face psychiatric evaluation.
Yeah, neither have I. It's incredibly worrying, actually. I think what'll be equally disturbing is if they sort of roll out these laws equivalent to the ones in France on a European level.
Well, that's what I was just when you were kind of saying in your last bit there. The covering migrant movement, that kind of thing could be argued to be inciting hatred. Well, look, if it does spread over Europe, look at what is going on, obviously, in the various towns and cities in primarily England, on the British Isles. You've got Rotherham, Rochdale, Newcastle, various other cities where there's been a vast amount of girls being groomed and being raped by a specific group of Asian men, primarily, and obviously people's patience is wearing extremely thin. That the police appear to be doing very little on the grand scheme of things. And it's getting to the point where people are starting to get violent. Well, if the precedent continues as what's happening to Marine Le Pen, is it that if people then speak out and push back against the apparent ongoing grooming of English girls, is that then going to be a criminal offence? That if you push back against people who are committing these atrocities, you will therefore be criminalised for effectively speaking out against it?
Well, I could certainly see that happening. I'm thinking especially of the more brutal cases. I was reading one the other week about, I can't remember her name now, but a girl who was killed by Asian paedophiles and then cut up and put into kebabs in their kebab shop. And, that's similarly gruesome to the thing that Marine Le Pen tweeted about beheadings and whatnot. So you could reasonably envisage a situation whereby just reporting on these facts becomes against the law. And that actually reminds me of around the time of the Bataclan attack, when, as everybody will know, terrorists went into the Bataclan theatre and shot a load of people, and it was very, very gruesome. But you might know more about this, but if I remember rightly, the specific details of the way in which some of the bodies were mutilated was actually suppressed and hidden from the press in France. Do you have any detail? Do you know much about that?
No, I don't. I know obviously there was the men who went into the Bataclan. They went into the toilets. They checked bodies. They made various investigations into making sure that people were dead and continued to, mutilate people's bodies. So yeah, it genuinely wouldn't surprise me. And the whole thing about kind of silencing certain points and certain pieces of information, I get in certain circumstances, in times gone past, where the press would attempt to come across being professional by, not being too graphic, not being too obvious with the reporting. But it's getting to the point now where you can't escape from these facts. These things are happening all the time, and to black out on them is an insult to these people's memories. And what frustrates me more than anything is, to go back further than Bataclan, go back to Charlie Hebdo. You had the cartoon company, and you had everybody saying "Je suis Charlie Hebdo." Everybody was saying these people are not going to stop us from carrying on doing what we're doing. We caricature Muhammad, we draw cartoons because that is what we do. We're not going to let these things stop us from doing what we do. And lo and behold, less than a year later, you're having people being hushed up and saying, you can't push back against these things. You can't criticize for fear of further incitement. And to me, what I draw a comparison of this with is, in the lead up to the Second World War, you had the commentators, the history books saying, how the Western countries, France, Britain would continue to allow Hitler to do more and more things, with the hope that once he got, a certain amount of land, a certain amount of the population, he would be sated, he would stop and not want to go any further. The whole idea of appeasement, and obviously appeasement does not work. It's been proven not to work through history. And this is what I see in this situation continuously in politics. It's this attempt to appease the extreme parts of Islam, the extreme parts of the refugee movements, for hope that if you kind of ignore it, you kind of don't tackle it too much, it will kind of just go away. And we know that doesn't work. Historically, we know that doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, just by stopping people like Marine Le Pen tweeting about what ISIS get up to, it will not stop the actions of the extremists within the religion. That's evident. Whether we publicise it or don't publicise it, but I think it's interesting the timing of this latest announcement with Marine Le Pen, because the polls show that Macron's ruling party has lost a lot of support, and the National Front, or the I can't remember what they changed their name to, but Marine Le Pen's party have got level with Macron's party. So I think it could be a case of the establishment also worrying about the next local parliamentary elections in France, which could put Marine Le Pen's party in a much stronger position.
Well, is Macron's polling numbers not less or lower than Donald Trump's right now? And he has had largely positive mainstream media coverage, whereas Trump's had something like 94 or 95% negative media coverage since being elected president. And obviously you've got this whole thing right now in the States with Kavanaugh being alleged to have sexually assaulted now 2 females, I believe. And whether or not it happened, it's the same thing. It seems to be strategically done at a time when you've got your elections coming up for your 2 years for the Senate and all these kind of things. And if they can hold out, they can potentially stop Kavanaugh from being confirmed as one of the Republican Supreme Court members. So to me, it just seems to be like you're saying, it's very politically motivated. If we can get Marine Le Pen either arrested or deemed to be insane, then they have to find a new front runner, and we'll have to build up support for them.
Yeah, it reminds me of before the 2010 election in the United Kingdom, when I don't know if it was 2008 or 9, when Nick Griffin was hauled in front of the courts on trumped-up hate speech charges. He was acquitted. I think Mark Collett was as well, and they were both acquitted. But it is a case of there's a worrying pattern here that whenever a party or a person or a movement begins to look as if they're making gains, like Marine Le Pen, they are pulled in front of the courts on very spurious charges, and in an attempt to damage their public relations machine. I'm just sort of waiting to see what happens in Germany, because as everybody will know, the Alternative for Deutschland are doing really well in the polls, and they're only second behind Merkel's party. So it'd be interesting to see. I reckon at least 1 or 2 of their parliamentarians will be hauled before the courts before the next federal elections. It will be interesting to see what happens there.
And I mean, the thing is in these kind of political schemes, it's not something new. I mean, you've got some history, historical records of. Obviously, during the Roman times, the senates would employ the most dirty tactics to ensure that they were voted, or employ measures to make sure that their political opponents either were taken out permanently, or ensure that they wouldn't rise up against. So, but to think in a in a time where allegedly we are supposed to be more civilized than ever. You've got your human rights, you've got supposed to be democratic elections in the Western world, yet you've got these dirty tactics being employed because ultimately a party can't take it that an opposing party is gaining popularity.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's that the established parties have had it so easy for so long that they can't now stomach the fact that
they can't debate, is what I'm convinced of. They've had it so good for so long that when people who have decent debate skills turn up, they can't win in a debate, so they just resort to these skullduggery tactics.
Yeah, and this is the thing about Marine Le Pen. I mean, anybody who's, I'm sure most of our listeners will have done this, anybody who's watched her on YouTube or her speeches in the European Parliament or the French Parliament, or anything like that. Not the Parliament, because she was a councillor, the council speeches and things like that. Then everybody will know that she's very charismatic and she can put a point across very well. And it's very difficult to. If you put yourself in the position of the opponent, it's very difficult to counter what she says. I'm sure there's an element of that, is that they can't stem the tide playing fair, so they have to play dirty with these ridiculous charges and these silly court proceedings.
Yeah, I know. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens in this case, and then what happens in the future if she is successfully charged or is deemed to be criminally insane. Is this going to be another floodgate for another kind of strategy for bumping off political opponents in the future?
Yeah, it's definitely looking that way. It definitely is. It's just the question now is can nationalist figures like Marine Le Pen and others in other countries, can they ride the wave and somehow find a way to counter these efforts? It'll be interesting to see how they do, because without having a position of power to fight from, it's difficult for these parties to fight back against an establishment that has all of the parliamentarians and the judges and whatnot on their side. We'll follow these the developments as and when they appear. With this one, I'm sure it's a topic we're going to talk about more in the coming weeks when the case unfolds, and of course any other similar cases across Europe. Before we go, I just want to remind everybody, like I said at the beginning, there's links to previous podcasts in the description below, and also to our donations if anybody wants to help us out. Before we do go, Darth, is there any last point on this you want to share with the listeners?
No, I think everybody's pretty clear that this is a clearly politically motivated strategy. I really just hope that the French people who are backing her and people in other countries who are of a similar mind, I really think they need to start being more vocal and banding together, because the media and the establishment aren't going to change their tune anytime soon. So something needs to give, and people need to come up with a proper way of changing people's minds, because no matter what people do, they're always going to be branded as racist or Nazi or all the other names under the sun. That is, we need to just accept that is going to be the case and find ways of changing people's minds successfully.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's hearts and minds is the order of the day. We need to find a way of staying in the battle, despite the dirty tactics of the enemy. I guess that concludes our short episode this week. If there's any French people listening who want to get in touch about this and maybe come and chat to us in a subsequent episode, then drop us an email or in the comments below. And as ever, thanks for listening.
See you guys.
Bye.